Welcome to Stories with Steve, a podcast on the Central Buna Podcast Network. Every Thursday in 5 minutes or less, we'll lift you up with stories of how God works behind the scenes in our lives. Romans 8:28 tells us that God works all things together for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. Now with an encouraging story, here's Steve.
Hey, thanks so much for joining me today. Hey, got a seat reserved right for you. You can just pour up a cup of coffee and just join me this morning. Thanks so much. Last week I kind of shared about my fundraising trip, how I got to Brazil and how God worked it out. Well, this is kind of a part two, actually, of the actual trip itself. When I was a kid, I used to have a big globe that I used to spin around in circles, and I would just kind of randomly point to different countries where I'd like to go, and it was I had fun. Well, little did I know I would ever wind up in Brazil. About the only thing I knew about Brazil was it was a really big, huge country, like maybe top five as far as land, and it was below the equator. I knew that part. I knew they spoke Portuguese, so I tried to learn up as much as I could. So for me, this is a big deal. Never been out of the country before. It's a very, very long plane ride down there, and so when we touched down, I didn't feel like I was in another country. I felt like I was in a completely different world. It was that much of a culture shock. And so what we did was we met as a group, and then we broke up in teams every single day. And we went from house to house doing, meeting people and evangelizing, and really to invite them into the night services. And so they told me, you're going to be leading the night services. I'm like, what? Who? Me? What? And the interesting thing was, though, obviously, they don't speak English, they speak Portuguese, and so I had to have a translator. And so that was something I had to learn how to do. But I tell you what, the people in Brazil were such beautiful people, the most hospitable people I've ever met in my life. When we went house to house, they welcomed you. And every little house we went into had offered some kind of coffee. And Brazilian coffee is the blackest coffee you've ever had in your life. Okay, if you've had espresso, this is espresso on steroids, and it's served in a little shot glass. You don't think it's that much. And they would also serve you some kind of bread. And I mentioned these houses are little bitty houses. Well, they didn't have much seating, and so the people would sit on the floor to listen to you talk. They were honored to have you in their house. And so we got to share with these people. And just walking down the streets, I remember the little children that would follow you everywhere. And just really, I felt like I was back in the New Testament, the book of Acts. It really felt that good. And so at night, I had the opportunity to speak and through a translator, and we saw, I don't know, dozens every night come down the aisle and accept Christ. Interesting thing about Brazil is their culture down there. They don't really call themselves Christians because that's associated with the Catholic Church. In the Protestants, they call themselves crente, which means believer. And if you go on the street, you ask somebody, are you a crente or not a crente, a believer or non-believer, there's pretty much a yes or no answer. Whereas in America, a lot of people say they're Christian because it's a cultural thing. So that's one thing I learned there. There's also a little bit of a cultic thing down there because Brazilians had some African slave trade. And so there was a cultic, like you'd see some candles and chicken feathers. But hey, you got to speak to some of those people too. But it's just amazing, the simple gospel that people responded. And I'm just like, hey, why can't people do that here in this country? But it was absolutely amazing. And the bond that you felt with these people, I mean, the absolute love, even though you didn't speak the same language, it just absolutely blew me away, the people. And when I left there, people were literally just holding on to me, crying. And the love that I felt for these people, Brazil is it's an amazing place, and the people are amazing. So fast forward, I got to go back to Brazil 2 years later through another church. And this time, the fundraising, I didn't have as much trouble. Maybe it was a bigger church. Maybe I just learned to trust God this time. But that was another great experience. The first time I was in Rio de Janeiro, and the second time in Sao Paulo. Well, if you've ever seen any pictures of Rio de Janeiro, there's this big statue called Christ the Redeemer up on a mountain overlooking the water, and you can see pretty much Rio de Janeiro. And you can see the stark contrast between just wealth and poverty. You can see just the money, and then you can see the people living on little shacks. People down there don't have much, but there's such a love down there, something that I experienced that I will take with me for the rest of my life. And that Christ the Redeemer statue is a huge statue on top of a mountain. And you look up at it and you see Christ's hands reaching across the world. And I think how symbolic of that that He gave us a great commission, and we're to be His hands and feet wherever we go in the world. And He may not call you to go overseas. He may call you to go across the street or somewhere else, but I know He gives us all a calling. And if you've ever had an experience like that, life-changing experience like God's done in your life, I'd love to hear about it. Feel free to drop us a comment. And thank you so much for listening today. Always remember, you've got a story to tell.